Our today's hero is a unique poet who not only wrote poetry but also embodied the genuine poetry of the heart. This amazing man flashed brightly like a star in the sky and left a trail, which is still shining up to this day. This is the People's Tribune, translator, poet, and chairman of the Poetry Council of the Writers' Union, Zharaskan Abdrashev.
Biknur Kisikov, writer, author of numerous novels, stories, and poems, member of jury of literature contest, inspirer and organizer of Kityap Fest festival.
He was born in the Aral district of the Kizlordar region.
According to some sources, he was born in the village of Akshi, and according to others, in the village of Aman Otkel.
By the way, I once visited those villages, the inhabitants of which are mainly engaged in fishing. Another poet, Shomush Bai Sariev, as well as writers Abdi Jamil Nurpisov and Zinullah Shukurov, spent their childhood on the shores of the Aral Sea. Amazing places. He was a real poet, Zharaskan Abdrashev. There are very few such bright phenomena in Kazakh literature, and Zharaskan was a real one. He was a naked soul, a bare nerve, subtle, sensual, and in a sense, defenseless. I loved him very much. We were great friends. Yermek Tursunov, director, writer. As I have already mentioned before, U-turns are intrinsic to the biographies of various poets. Preparing themselves for earthly and pragmatic professions, they suddenly changed their lives and plunged into the magical complex world of poetry. And our hero, too, studied at the Qazaq Agricultural College at first. He was preparing to become an agronomist. However, as a 15-year-old student, he was publishing his first poems on the pages of the regional newspapers Tolkien and Lenin Tui, as well as in the regional newspaper Lenin Jolie. And apparently, having finally realized what his true calling was, he then entered the Kazakh State University, the Faculty of Philology. Zharaskan quickly conquered the capital. He was a frequent guest at creative evenings. He was published in the press, and he would read his poems to fellow students and friends. And eventually he achieved such a great popularity among the student community of the city that almost every young person in the capital could recite his poems by heart. Later, Nazigul, the muse and wife of the poet, would recall the moment when she first met Zharaskan at a creative evening at Kazakh State University. Everyone was reading poems, people talked, socialized. Suddenly a guy came up to us, unattractive, poorly dressed, with pimples on his face. At first glance, I didn't like him, but when he went on stage and began to read his poems, everyone just froze, and a whisper swept through the hall. Zharaskan will read now. It is Zharaskan. When he started to read, I realized he was the one. My heart, my darling, hear me out. There are no dark thoughts in there. Don't you dare comparing me, as before you, a true poet. Even then, he amazed everyone with his talent. His creative evening gigs were always sold out. He was only 21 years old when he became a member of the Writers' Union. And despite being so young, he wrote some very passionate and deep lyrics, as mature as wise old man's thoughts. It is the great love that will once let you fly up or drop down. You can only leave motherland once, to the foreign land, poor and cold. May you languish with desire. Preserve your honor, there is nothing more, and with your only heart, celebrate everything that is unique. After graduating from university, he worked in the Qazaq Adibiyete newspaper. Later, the poet headed the department of poetry in the Yulduz magazine. He also had a chance to work in the Writers' Union of Kazakhstan. It is interesting that Zharaskan had a hand in creating the humorous show Tamasha, being the editor-in-chief of this famous musical and entertainment theater. Zharaskan Abdrashev was also a master of epigrams, short satirical poems denouncing a particular social phenomenon. Moreover, he was pronounced one of the key representatives of this genre in Kazakhstan. In 1989, Abdrashev published a comic collection entitled ticklish quill, where he collected all the epigrams he wrote. The book was a tremendous success and later was quoted by many of his followers. Abdrashev was also known as a literary translator. He translated famous classics of world literature, authors like Alexander Pushkin, Paul Eluard, and Rabindranath Tagore into the Qazaq language. Translations of children's literature occupied a special place in his work. It was thanks to him that children were able to read the books of Agnia Barto, Kornei Chukovsky, and many others in the Kazakh language. And his poems were too translated into many languages of the world. One of the collections of his poems was translated into Russian by Rima Kazakova, a famous Soviet and Russian poetess. The songs based on her poems were performed by many Soviet singers, from Rotaru to Piecha. After all, there were loads of things to translate, as it was not for nothing that his contemporaries considered his poems to be genius. Over his entire career, the poet has published more than 20 books. He perceived the world as a single poetic image. He inhabited it. This is how the famous cultural scientist and public figure Murat Ovezov once described Zharaskan Abdrashev. As a true poet and akin, he would only write about what he saw and felt. He also wrote about his grief about the Aral Sea in his work, Sor Tobe. For him, whose ancestors lived on the seashore, this was a deeply personal family tragedy. Abdrashev existed at the center of public and political life. For example, he established an award for young talents, which was later named after him. He was also one of the founders and organizers of the Agrarian Party of Kazakhstan. And yet his true mission was poetry. Today I would like to talk to you about one of the most important and significant creations of the poet, about the Steppe, I Am Your Son poem. Steppe, I Am Your Son is an ode to the steppe, a kind of manifesto and appeal to the homeland, and at the same time, it is a poem of atonement. In his verses, the poet addressed the steppe in the following words. My dear steppe, a sacred legend, both friend and foe praised your threshold. Give me my happiness, take my confession. I've commenced one chapter, that is all. I would tell those who will divide the sky into the crescent and the star. If my steppe wants it, I'll become a loaf of bread. If it gets angry, I will kneel down in an instant. Oh dear steppe, how can we live apart? My blood flows in your blood. I will give up my sight and hands for you. I will give up my heart. As our ancestors once told us, together with the people, I repeat again. Let us, O steppe, feel your sorrows. Let us, O steppe, feel your love for once. In the poem, the author laments that by his 27 years he did not have time to do much. After all, if 27 for Abai was just youth, then for Lermontov it was his entire life. How many fortresses, grieves the author, were captured before his birth? How many battles have been won? But he is not a Batir, and he has no accomplishments worthy of a true hero. He was not one of the warriors of Amangildi Imanov's army during the uprising, nor was he Gani Muratbayev's companion. The author regrets that he did not storm the Reichstag next to Rahim Koshkarbayev. Excerpt from Zharaskan Abdrashev's poem, Steppe, I Am Your Son. When time swirls again, and you will summon a soldier to a feat, I will stand for you to the very end. Mother Steppe, oh, do not be a biased judge. Mother Steppe, I want a lot. I wish I could be a mountain range. I want to soar up like a rock, in pursuit of a star. Do not hesitate, believe, I will not let you down. I will gain power at every kilometer. I will become a green grove and leave, spreading branches to the sky, thinking about the wind. I will make my heart dive down into dust and sing along with whirlwinds just like spindles. I would like my steppe to become your flower, gleaming with colors in the sun. The poet is sad that his steppe has witnessed a lot. It experienced the invasion of the army of Genghis Khan and the army of Timur. witnessed the destruction of the sea as well as many other disasters. But the steppe would revive again time after time through the fiery verses of Mahambet, through the magical cues of Kurmangazi, through the songs of Amrea, through the mighty power of Kajimu Khan, and because of the courage of Baujan Mamushuli. The steppe never spared its generosity and always offered food feast for its guests. But was the steppe loved and appreciated? The steppe is exhausted from human heartlessness and cruelty, and there is no one to protect it. After the release, this poem has caused quite a stir. Here I should explain that during the Soviet period, authors could suffer for their writings. For example, during the years of repression, the philologist Kudaibergen Zhubanov and the poet Saken Sifulin were killed. And although those brutal Stalinist repressions did not exist anymore in the 1970s when Abdrashev was writing his poems, still, there were certain precedents like the one with the famous poet Joseph Brodsky, who was expelled from the country in 1972, literally a couple of years before Zharaskan's poem was written. The poem was ostracized. It was considered anti-Soviet propaganda. A commission was gathered at the Writers' Union to discuss the poem, but the luminaries of Qazaq literature, authors like Abdilda Tajibayev, Sirbay Maulenov, Hamid Yergali, and others, stood up to defend the young poet. This was how Zharaskan escaped lynching. But as his contemporaries said, he fell into disgrace and had never received an award since. From the memoirs of the film director Rustem Abdrashev, Zharaskan Abdrashev's eldest son. Back then, my father suffered greatly. He was fired from his job. He was pronounced a nationalist and Magjan Jumabayev's follower. It was believed that he glorified his steppe too ardently. Today, after some time had passed, we can say that his words have become prophetic. In his poem, my father predicted the future because he wrote that one day in the very center of Saryarka, in the middle of the steppe, a new flourishing capital will appear, which will later become a symbol of our independent state. At that time, it seemed like a pipe dream and a utopia of some kind, but today we are witnessing how this dream is turning into reality. By the way, Rustem directed a film entitled The Island of Revival, which was based on one of his father's writings. The film was a great success and received international recognition. It was awarded various prizes at film festivals around the world. Time. Hey, spin the earth. I'm tired, and you are grumpy again. Heat and cold, slush and ice, and it doesn't count my nerves, which were ruined by you. You do not want to stop running for a moment. I'm full or I'm hungry. You don't give a damn. I squeeze the sides of the racer, but I can't keep the roaring herd in my chest. You will fill me with drinks to the brim, and then my recklessness is your catch. With longing like a stone, you will squeeze my chest, assuring me later that this is my lot. Then in response to me, you will neither say yes nor no. You now cling to me and flatter me as if I am your twin. Then you will order, spin, and here I'm spinning like hell. I'm roaring like an ox, completely mad. If we are relatives, if we are children of nature, don't consider me a puppet when playing with me. Zharaskan Abdrashev's contribution to Qazaq poetry cannot be overestimated. After all, he was a true folk poet. In his poems, one can find providence and sense the pain he felt for his people, the people who remember their great son.